John Pollack, shortcut, How Analogies Reveal Connections, Spark Innovation, and Sell Our Greatest Ideas. Dive into the world of analogies and discover their incredible power to spark innovation, shape policy decisions, and sway the outcomes of debates. In a shortcut, How Analogies Reveal Connections, Spark Innovation, and Sell Our Greatest Ideas, John Pollack explores how analogies have played a significant role in revolutionizing industries, such as Ford's assembly line and Apple's desktop operating system. He also reveals the dark side of analogies, showing how they can distort arguments and mislead people. By summarizing the book's key highlights, this mobile summary will guide you through the fascinating art of analogies and how they can change the world.
Inspiration for efficiency. Analogies as innovation triggers. The idea of the assembly line was born out of an unlikely source, a Chicago slaughterhouse in 1913. While visiting it, Ford engineer Bill Clan observed how the butchering process was streamlined using trolleys. He compared it to the way his company produced cars and used the analogy to develop the assembly line, where a product moves through a line of employees performing designated tasks. This innovation drastically reduced production time and revolutionized the manufacturing industry. Analogies, or comparisons between unrelated things, are a powerful tool for creating deeper understanding and sparking innovation. Analogies are used daily to explain complex ideas. A good analogy can inspire new ways of thinking and spur creativity. The comparison of butchering animals to manufacturing cars provided the spark that led to one of the most significant innovations in the 20th century. Today, analogies continue to inspire new ideas and drive progress in all areas of life. The power of analogies. Analogies have the ability to change the world, from simplifying complex technology to influencing policy decisions. In the early days of personal computers, an analogy of a desktop made operating systems accessible to everyone. Similarly, Admiral Arthur Radford's domino theory analogy impacted the White House's policy decisions and led to 2 American invasions. Although the Vietnam War ended differently from the analogy, it exemplifies how powerful analogies can be in shaping people's perception. Analogies simplify concepts, making them digestible and more relatable, thus improving understanding in decision-making. Analogies are widely used in education, business, politics, and everyday life, and being able to craft effective analogies is a valuable tool for anyone. The power of analogies lies in their ability to connect complex ideas with familiar ones, making information more easily comprehensible and memorable. The power of analogies. Analogies can twist arguments, and it's crucial to be mindful of the analogy you use. No analogy is neutral, they all have subjective ideas or connotations. For instance, the common analogy of the economy as an ecosystem seems straightforward at first glance. However, an ecosystem is unregulated, and if you compare the economy to it, you're implying it should be free of any government control. This means you need to be careful with the analogies you use, as they'll influence your approach to the subject. A war analogy can be powerful, but not necessarily in a good way. The U.S. declaring its problems with illegal drugs. The war on drugs limits the ways to solve the problem. It implies standing your ground and not giving in. This analogy can be problematic since some suggest that certain soft drugs could be legalized to improve the drug problem, but how can you do that in a war? The power of relevant analogies. Analogies have the power to emotionally resonate with people and can be very powerful if relevant and understandable. To be effective, analogies need to be relatable to the audience, like the analogy Bruce Reynolds used when he compared his mail train robbery to the Sistine Chapel. Using a well-known reference, as opposed to a trivial comparison, can ensure that an analogy is impactful. However, some comparison clichés, such as Pandora's box, have lost their power due to overuse. Relevant and creative analogies have the potential to convey complex ideas in a simpler, more relatable manner. Analogies in DNA analysis. The use of analogies has played a vital role in the development of DNA analysis. An analogy is considered valid and the similarities between two things outweigh their differences. The use of DNA samples in crime scenes was initially controversial, but proponents argued that DNA was the fingerprints of the 21st century. Fingerprinting and DNA samples are both ways to identify and link individuals to traces at a crime scene. The analogy succeeded in making DNA testing as common as fingerprinting in crime investigations. The success of this analogy was facilitated by a process called structure mapping, where individuals automatically apply their understanding of one thing to another. While fingerprinting and DNA samples have significant differences, proponents emphasize the similarities, making the analogy persuasive. The power of abstraction in analogies. Analogies become powerful when they use abstraction, making connections between seemingly unrelated topics. Our brains are skilled at abstract thinking. For example, in the O.J. Simpson trial, John Cochran used the abstract analogy of the tight gloves to imply that the whole trial's evidence was unsuitable, leading to Simpson's acquittal. Similarly, Bill Clan's assembly line analogy used the abstraction of the overhead trolleys in the slaughterhouse to streamline car production. This shows that analogies can be effective only through abstraction. The power of storytelling. The human brain seeks coherence, making stories an efficient shortcut to comprehend complex information. Stories are memorable and provide connections and causations that make sense. Leaving out information can make an analogy clearer, and people will accept incomplete stories more readily than incoherent ones. The need to make sense of the world is fundamental to humans. Our brains are wired to respond to stories because they process random information into something we can understand. Stories provide an efficient shortcut to comprehension, making them an essential tool in the transfer of complex information. A good story is a memorable flow of information, complete with connections and causations that make sense. Simplicity is key when it comes to storytelling, even when conveying complex ideas like economic growth, where the familiar analogy, "a rising tide lifts all boats," illustrates how sparse information, when intelligently framed, can be useful. Interestingly, our brains also respond positively to incomplete stories. Leaving out information can paradoxically make an analogy clearer. Humans will accept incomplete stories to a higher degree compared to incoherent ones. By telling stories that provide coherence and clarity, we can better cope with our aversion to uncertainty. The power of storytelling lies in its ability to turn an ocean of random information into a concise narrative that we can remember and understand. The power of emotional appeals. We like to consider ourselves rational beings, but according to psychologist Daniel Kahneman, our emotions often overpower our reason. This means that analogies with emotional appeal are more convincing than those focused on logic. The example of John Roberts, a conservative judge who compared judges to umpires during his confirmation hearing, illustrates this well. The emotional appeal of the analogy caused people to overlook its faulty nature, and Roberts was promoted to the Supreme Court as Chief Justice. However, judges in the Supreme Court do make rules, making the analogy inaccurate. Nevertheless, Roberts achieved his goal through the power of emotional appeals. This highlights the importance of understanding the role emotions play in decision-making and how to use them effectively.
Analogies are everywhere, and they wield immense power. They can ignite innovation, as seen in Ford's assembly line inspired by a slaughterhouse, and transform industries, such as Apple's desktop operating system. However, Pollack also highlights the potential drawbacks of analogies. They can twist arguments, misguide political decisions, and perpetuate clichés. By understanding the strengths and weaknesses of analogies, you can harness their power to gain a deeper understanding of complex ideas and even revolutionize the world around you. Remember not to take analogies at face value, but scrutinize them for relevancy, accuracy, and coherence, as they can influence your approach to solving problems and shaping your ideas.